We always say seat time is king, so sit on down and listen in to Motorsports Tech Talk with your hosts, Brian and Eric. Eric, how's it going?
Doing good, Brian. Did you know that the racing season has officially started?
I think I did know that. I think hopefully all of our listeners know that too, because we uploaded a podcast earlier last week about the racing season.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I'm not talking about some prototype challenge race. I'm talking about the 24 hours of Daytona that just finished.
Oh, the big boys, the big boys.
The WeatherTech series.
Yeah, it was it was a good race. It was really long, it was like 24 hours long or something.
Yeah, it's weird. I think it was in the name. But yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It was like something about Rolexes and I don't know, but
yeah, who knows?
But yeah, it was they had a very good weather this year. No rain as far as I could tell. That's
decent weather.
It's always nice.
The race started off pretty silly. I can't even really say started off. Let's just be blunt. The BMW hit the Porsche before they took the green flag.
Yep.
They hadn't cross-checkered.
Yep.
The race hadn't officially started, and they took out a car.
Yeah, that was a little funky. They were talking about it later. Supposedly, which seems like a weird rule. So supposedly, the green flag means nothing, which it's weird. So the leader controls the pace.
Yeah, that's correct. Green flag drops, and then you have to wait until the leader crosses start finish.
Yeah. So, but I feel like that's a weird. I guess coming from like Champ Car and NASA, like that's as soon as you see the flag, that means go, and regardless of if the guy in front hasn't started moving or hasn't started accelerating yet, you're going.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, I get it, but also I don't know. So supposedly at least from like interviews later, in the spotter comes over the radio to the BMW driver and is green. So he just guns it without really, I guess, looking in front of him. And I mean, obviously these are fast cars. If I did this in the Miata, going full throttle Miata isn't very noticeable from going part throttle
right
down the straight.
Yeah, you wouldn't have rear-ended anybody.
No, it would have taken a couple seconds to get close to rear-ending someone.
Yes.
Whereas, those cars have a lot more horsepower, but still, he just kind of gunned it, and then no one else gunned it, and I guess I think he could he got to the point where he could have maybe braked or just tried to jump out to avoid, and he just kind of chose the jump out to avoid, but it was too late at that point, and just
it wasn't enough.
Smoked the back of him. So that caused the Porsche to lose several laps in repairing, and also caused the first caution, not from that initial hit, but from the bumper flying off because from the damage. So
yeah, I mean the Porsche stayed out. I guess as you should. Maybe "should's" the wrong word, but as I would, right? Like if it's not broken yet, I'm not going to come into the pits, right? Unless I need to. With these races, getting off the lead lap is really what hurts you. So I wouldn't come into the pits unless I really needed to. So, I would do the same thing as the Porsche. But it does raise a weird note that, so the BMW got a drive-through penalty, right?
Yep.
And yet the Porsche was further down, right? I mean, as you do, right? It takes longer to repair something than to just drive past your pits and wave at everybody. Yep. But so it's interesting to note the guy who got rear-ended suffered more than the guy who did the rear-ending.
Yep. Unfortunately, that's kind of how it goes. The guy gets a slap on the wrist and a penalty, which in a 24-hour race they can make it up, pretty easily.
Right. Yeah, as long as you stay on that lead lap. You know?
Yeah, it was funny specifically how that one unfolded. Basically, as soon as he served the penalty, and then the bumper went flying off of the Porsche right after, and then so the caution immediately came out, so he was right back behind the pack.
Yeah, there was very little detriment in that case.
Yeah,
So,
so it was like it didn't happen.
pro tip: play bumper cars. Apparently,
Yeah.
if you hurt them more than they hurt you, you're going to come out ahead. So,
Yeah, especially when the class is only 6 cars. It's everyone you take, every guy you tackle is, it's going to be beneficial to you.
significantly. Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess it's also a pro tip to the manufacturers to put like big bash bars on their car, or at least make their fronts really rigid, so they just at the start of races you can accidentally punt people accidentally,
Right. Yeah.
air quotes there.
Get rid of those silly ballast plates you have and just add reinforcement to your bumper when you get BOP'd. That's the real key.
There you go. So GTLM got off to a pretty rough start. Fortunately, it looked like for the most part everyone kind of was able to avoid all the GTD cars behind, avoid the spin. But I think also the Ferrari got a little damage from that too. So it was like in one move the BMW kind of hurt 2 cars.
Yeah.
One more than the other. But
I mean, hey,
so then
that's not only is that 2 cars, but that's the 2 other manufacturers, right?
Yeah.
So if you put both of them back, it's like, well, it's BMW and Corvette. And even if BMW, pretending that the Porsche and the Ferrari couldn't make it up, I mean, that gives them a guaranteed podium. I'm not inferring they did it on purpose like that. I'm just, that's the way it works out, right? So.
Yep. Yeah. So it's it kind of it set the stage for basically a Corvette runaway for the most part. The BMWs didn't seem to have at least the kind of full stint pace. They'd be usually pretty quick at the beginning of the stint and then just kind of would fall off.
Yeah.
And the Corvettes were just very strong all weekend. They'd get reeled back in every caution, and then they would just kind of drive away to the tune of like 10 to 20 seconds between cautions, and it looked like they had it in the bag. But there was a few times towards the end where they were challenged. The BMW kind of tried some short fueling strategies to get ahead, but ultimately just didn't have enough pace to stay ahead. And then the Ferrari at the very end, they just tried to gamble on getting a yellow to extend their last stint, and just never got it. So they also ended up, because of that, they ended up in, I believe they ended up in 5th behind the BMWs. No, sorry, 4th. So between the 2 BMWs. So
Yeah.
So it ended up ultimately for GTLM, we ended up Corvette 1-2, with the 3 car ahead of the 4, and then the 24 BMW, the Ferrari, the Risi Ferrari, and then the other BMW, and then finally the Porsche that finished several laps down. So that one maybe wasn't as exciting, probably maybe the least exciting of all the classes, especially because, I mean, all the excitement was kind of at the start, and then...
Right. Yeah, and then they're spread out. It's already kind of a small field. Anybody who's paying attention, they're going to GTD Pro next year. So they're getting rid of the class because it's a small field. There's going to be GTD as it is now, and then GTD Pro, which is just pro drivers. So, I mean, it already starts as a small field, and then half your competition takes each other out, and it just sets a stage,
and then going forward, BMW is really only committed to the endurance races, so it's like Sebring, Watkins Glen, Road Atlanta. So they're only running the enduros. Risi hasn't confirmed any additional dates past the 24, so I guess we'll have to keep a lookout for that. if that's the case, I wouldn't expect them outside of the Enduros as well. I don't think they would just surprise everyone with a full season effort.
Yeah, I don't think they would.
So
yeah, if they're doing more, it's probably just the Enduros.
Yeah, and it might even just be just some of the Enduros too. So, but hopefully they come out, because it'd be nice to get more in that class. And then so that leaves the WeatherTech Racing Porsche and the 2 Corvettes as the 3 full season entries. So
right,
automatic podiums for everyone.
Hooray! Everybody gets a trophy,
except at the Enduros. Yeah, not automatic.
No. That's what we're supposed to do, right? That's how things work now. Everybody gets a trophy.
Yeah.
But interesting note, with that class of 3 cars, the Porsche is going to be the only one that has a silver driver.
Yes, yeah, they have Cooper McNeil of the WeatherTech dynasty. He is one of the drivers. I believe he's going to be one of the full season drivers. So he'll be joined by, I'm not sure which one yet, but one of the Porsche factory drivers. So yeah, it'll be. It's not common to see a, quote unquote non-pro in just at least by rating in that class. But he'll be racing with them all season, and then supposedly also at Le Mans in a GTE Pro Porsche. So
oh, buddy.
So yeah, but yeah, so that could definitely hurt them a little bit, if assuming if he's even a little bit off the pace from the factory drivers. So
right,
that'll be something to look out for. Maybe they'll have him start the races and then try to have the pro finish it. So
yeah, it wouldn't be such a bad. Probably the best approach they can have,
Yeah.
So
I guess it's been seen before to have pro or non-pros in a pro class, but that's more it's been more common in DPI. Like over the years, there was the Core Autosport car that was had John Bennett driving, at least one of the cars, and so it's happened, but maybe not in GTE or GTLM. It's not very common, so. It looks like maybe they're trying to take advantage of those low car counts to try to get some good results, which, more power to them.
Right. Why not? If you can do it, go for it.
Yeah. So I guess moving from GTLM, we can go to the other GT class, which has the most entries.
Yeah, GTD.
GTD. So usually, GTD usually doesn't disappoint for some good action.
Right.
And I don't think they did disappoint. The end, there wasn't as much action as you'd like to see. A lot of years, it's like so many times it's been like someone runs out of fuel like at on the last lap, because like everyone's pushing the strategy and everything. And this year it was kind of a quiet end. I think the top 5 basically didn't change for the last like hour at least. But yeah, it ended up being the Mercedes of Windward Racing, which I believe is their debut for WeatherTech Series. Yeah, they came in straight in for the win, so that's pretty impressive.
I guess I don't know. I know Windward was racing a GT3 car before. I've seen it. I just don't remember where.
They've raced GT3 cars in SRO in a World Challenge, and then they've also raced I believe GT4 cars in the Michelin Pilot Series. So,
yeah. I know they've definitely been in the GT4 class, and I know that I've seen their GT3 cars.
Yeah. So, but yeah, this is their first time making the move to. My understanding is the first time making the move to WeatherTech. So, pretty good start. And it looked like the Mercedes were pretty strong, because second was also a Mercedes, the Sun Energy One team. They also, I believe they've raced in WeatherTech before, but maybe this was kind of a return after a few years. But But yeah, both of them had some factory drivers in there, Mauro Angel and Lucas Stoltz, as well as Raffaele Marciello, uh, all super fast guys, and
Yeah.
then their AMs were able to keep up the pace too. So that's what you got to do.
Right. Yeah, I
And
mean, we can. It's important for the AM to, they can be a little bit off the pace of the pro, but just due to the nature of how IMSA operates, the yellows will bunch cars back up, but if you get off that lead lap, as we've already mentioned or alluded to, it's a problem. So,
yeah,
it still worked for the AM, right? Because over 2 hours or whatever, all those laps add up. So it's easy, or it can be easy to fall behind. So good job to those guys.
yep, yeah. And then we had the Palmola Racing Lamborghini in third, the Porsche Wright Motorsports in fourth, and fifth we had Harder Racing Aston Martin. So yeah, a couple different manufacturers in there.
Yeah, I mean a good variety outside of that Mercedes. Yeah, and yeah, that the Wright Motorsports team had seems like a last minute change. I don't know how last minute it was, but I know Trent was in there and he wasn't initially intending to be.
Yeah, I believe he was.
So that's interesting, and it's always work for a driver to come up to speed like that.
Yeah, I believe he was a replacement for Hardwick, who was originally supposed to be in that car. I think he had he had an incident where I think they were worried that there could have been a concussion. I forget if it was because he also races in Pilot Challenge, so I don't know if it was in practice or during the Pilot Challenge practice or the Pilot Challenge race, but basically they brought in Trent kind of last minute to fill a spot, and and they ended up with a pretty good finish. So that's
right.
It's good to see. But yeah, otherwise there was one incident, kind of big incident with I believe it was the 21 AF Corsa car. Basically, the car, the Windward Mercedes and them got together going into one, and it was they ended up ruling it a racing incident. No one got penalized, but the Ferrari definitely ended up the loser of the two because they ended up hitting the tires and had some minor damage, but enough that they come in and kind of tape it up, fix it up, and they had a flat too, so they had a slow lap around to get back around. So they ended up finishing, but yeah, it was basically the Ferrari was passing the Mercedes, tried to kind of did an outside move, but didn't fully get by and kind of squeezed the Mercedes onto the inside grass, which kind of caused him to get a little loose, and then ended up tagging the Ferrari, which kind of sent them both into a spin. But then the Mercedes was fine. So, it's. I mean, he I think he squeezed the Mercedes a little too much, but at the same time, the Mercedes could have kind of backed out of it at that point. I think there were still several hours to go, so like maybe not too.
That's always the strange thing with like endurance racing, right?
Yeah.
You see what would generally be pictured as one person being too aggressive, but then you throw in the concept of, hey, it's a long race. You don't need to take risks. So now you're looking at the other driver, and truly it does take two to tango, but it always throws the endurance races, even at the crap can level. I guess always throw more skepticism at that second driver.
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, it's unfortunate that they tangled, and someone's gonna come out like. I was always going to be a winner and a loser in those kind of collisions, but yeah, it turned out to be the one kind of making the pass. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I think it could have gone either way. It was just it was just a racing incident,
Right.
But
yeah,
so
those
that was
happen.
kind of. I think if that wouldn't have happened, I think it would have been a much tighter race at the front there between those two cars towards the end. But that's racing for you.
Right. Yeah, it happens. So.
Yeah, and then GRT Grasser Racing, usually up towards the front. I think they won 2 of the last 3, at least before this year, and both cars had pretty big issues. They both had failures pretty early. One of them had it looked like an engine failure, lots of fire coming out of the back, and then the other car, I'm not sure what happened, but think might have actually had a similar failure, but they barely made it past the 12-hour mark. At least the 111 car, and the 19 only did about 6 hours. So that's it's sometimes it's just crazy. It seems like a similar thing happened with DPI, where both of the I guess the Whalen Engineering and the Mustang Sampling, which I believe are both JDC Miller run cars. Both of those cars had issues, and like multiple issues, and didn't end up finishing very well. I think they both ended up finishing, but just not well. And it's weird to see when a team brings multiple cars and all of them just have issues. It's just, is it the luck of the draw, or just did they both miss something for both cars?
Right. Do you know do you know the cause of that fire you mentioned?
No, I mean, it just looked like it was just like a kind of fire coming out the exhaust. The car didn't actually burn, fortunately. But yeah, like it looked like he tried to restart it and it just spit. It must have shot just oil out of it, like out of the exhaust or something, because it was just kind of a quick exhaust fire and then it was gone. But
okay. Yeah.
But yeah, it could have been a couple things, but it was definitely very catastrophic.
Yeah, it's never good.
So yeah, but yeah, I mean, that gets us through the GT cars, the prototypes. I guess starting now from the LMP3 and working our way up. So LMP3 was new for this year.
Yep.
And there was some concerns, I think, by the GT drivers that they would be kind of in the way, but it looked like it worked out pretty well. The GT LM cars were faster on the straight, so it was pretty easy for them to get by when they needed to. And then for the most part, they were able to outpace the LMP3 cars were able to outpace the GTD cars, so they all kind of slotted in pretty nicely. So that was good to see, and there weren't really. I mean, there was a lot of cautions at the beginning of the race, but once it calmed down, then everyone kind of settled in, and it was a lot cleaner.
Yeah.
But ultimately, Riley Motorsports ended up taking the win. It's always good to see. They brought 2 cars, and obviously they've been around for a long time. So taking a win in a new class is always good to see. And then we had Sean Creech Motorsport in second. I'm not too familiar with them.
Yeah, it's a new name to me.
And then Muehlner Motorsports America, who had won the prototype challenge race as well as the qualifying race. They finished third, so it looked like they might have had some kind of early issues, and we're somewhat recovering, but just it wasn't enough to make it back. One thing I thought was interesting was there was specifically for LMP3, there was a mandatory 8-minute pit stop in order to change out the braking components. So basically, mainly I guess pads and rotors, but some teams elected to do that pretty early. I forget which car it was. I think it was. They didn't end up finishing well, but I think it was the 52 car. the Pier 1 Matthias, and I believe it was them, and they came in like 7 hours in or so and did it. But I believe they said they were having some braking issues up to that point, so I guess they thought that's just
maybe
try to change it out and hopefully make it better. So they didn't finish well, so I don't know if ultimately they didn't finish the race, so I'm not sure if that's what did it, but but yeah, I mean, other teams kind of did it halfway. So yeah, and I believe my understanding was the reason they did that is because they just didn't want teams to really have to update these cars. They could keep them the homologated spec. They didn't want them to have to add dry brake lines and all the other fancy stuff. So yeah, it was, and 8 minutes was plenty of time for them to do it. I watched one team do the change, and I think they were done like probably 6 minutes in or so, and we're just kind of twiddling their thumbs, waiting to release the car. So I guess that also promotes them not going crazy with the setup to be able to do it. So because like we've seen at Le Mans, I got to hang out in the Corvette racing pits a few years ago and watch them do one of the brake changes, and yeah, they rolled the car in, and like flurry of people descend on it, and then like a minute later it was right back out. So they just replaced the whole rotor caliper assembly. It's all dry braked, and
it's really cool, like the way they have it. Not cheap, but but awesome to see it, because I mean, like you said, it's caliper, rotor pads, like that whole assembly is just off, back on,
Yeah, like the whole rotor is floating, so basically the only thing holding it on is the brake caliper, is at least and the wheel, of course. So as soon as you take the wheel off and undo the brake caliper bolts, it's just it just slides right off.
So it's a dry brake. So I assume everybody knows what that is, but you won't need to rebleed the lines essentially, and then it'll be your 2 caliper bolts. So there's no tool for the dry brake. You just pull one end and pull it apart. So pretty quick.
It's pretty sweet to see. But of course, like those little high pressure dry brakes, they'll cost you just eat one side of that fitting, like let alone the pair and then 4 of them.
Yeah, and then you gotta have the spares sitting on your calipers that are ready to go, or the ones that just came off. Yeah, all that stuff just adds up,
Yeah, for sure. So I guess they didn't want LMP3 teams to have to invest in that. So that was good to see. I think it was a good idea for that. And add a little bit of strategy to it when you wanted to try to get a yellow in order to do that pit stop, and you wanted to make sure it was a longer one. So yeah, it was. I thought that was interesting, but yeah. So Riley ended up taking the lead by 3 laps or so. So it was a pretty decisive victory. So and then in LMP2, I think this is shaping up to be a pretty, I mean, much kind of better attended race than previous years. But there's a lot of LMP2 teams that kind of were out early. There's a few of them within the first, looks like first 4 hours or so. There was at least 3 of them gone. They just kind of some incidents, some crashes, some failures, but so it wasn't. So that kind of thinned out the field a little bit, but ultimately the Era Motorsport team ended up taking the win with their crayon livery car. It sounded like they told the story on the broadcast. Basically, they had like a contest for someone to. It was to have fans try to color the car, and they had I believe a 6-year-old kid color it, and that's the one. That's the design that won. So it got some attention there, but yeah. So Era Motorsport took the win with Tower Motorsport in second. It was pretty tight for a while. They were only like they were seconds apart for a long time. Then there was, I think there might have been a penalty for Era, and then there was a penalty for Tower, so they just kind of kept trading off, and then eventually it looked like Tower might squeak it out, but they had to pit with like 10 minutes to go, so they were hoping for a caution.
Yeah.
And then Dragon Speed to finish third to finish out the podium there. So that brings us to the top class, DPI. It was I'd say a very good race this year. As we kind of talked about in the last episode, a lot of kind of musical chairs for teams and cars and drivers. So the Konica Minolta car, which was always, it's been a Cadillac or a GM product for so many years. I think they were saying like 18 years or something, and this year they got the Acura DPI car, and yeah, they ended up getting the win. It was pretty close at the end. The Chip Ganassi Cadillac, which is new for this season, were giving them a run for the money. They were kind of running them down at the end there, and then just had a catastrophic tire failure like with I think like 8 minutes to go. So
yeah, it sucks.
It kind of spoiled a dramatic finish. I guess it was still dramatic, but not in the way I guess we would have wanted. But yeah, there were five cars on the lead lap, which I think they said was a new record for the Daytona 24, having for fighting for the the overall lead, having 5 cars in the lead lap. So so that meant some good racing. So yeah, it was in second, ended up being the Ally Cadillac of Action Express, and they were close. They ended up passing the Mazda kind of with a few laps to go to get second. The Mazda was down several laps, kind of at least like kind of halfway through the race or so, but they slowly kind of worked their way back up, took advantage of the cautions, and were able to get a podium. So that's always good to see. In the past they've had a lot of reliability issues, so seeing them finish the full 24 is good to see.
Yeah, it's nice,
especially having only one car. So and then in fourth was the other Acura from Meyer Shank Racing, and fifth was the Chip Ganassi car after recovering from that tire failure. So pretty good race. It seems like every year it's the 10 car, the Wayne Taylor Racing car that seems to take it. And it doesn't. I guess it doesn't matter if it's a Cadillac or an Acura. They just they're always up there.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that speaks volumes for the team, right?
Yeah. So, it was interesting seeing the different cars. Definitely had their strengths in different areas. The Acura seemed to be the best kind of all rounder, at good enough straight line speed to hold off passes, but enough to do passes. And then the infield was still good, but not as good as the Cadillacs. It seemed like the Cadillacs seemed like the good infield pace and very good kind of grunt off the corners, but then would top out really early. And then the Mazda was kind of the top speed king, it looked like, and then kind of not enough drive off the corners though. So like their kind of average speed would be similar to other cars on the straights, but they'd start slow and end fast. So it made for potentially they get caught at the beginning of the straight or get passed, and then kind of all of a sudden hit the NOS button towards the end and kind of work their way back around. But once they got passed, it was hard for them, I think, to kind of keep the draft. Which was also interesting. It was, I believe, Ricky Taylor, when he got out of the 10 car with like an hour and a half to go, he made a comment of it was very windy at that point, and it was a headwind going down, like going through the kind of from the kind of through the oval down the, I guess, front straight, you could say, around the start finish line. Like it was a headwind going through there, and because of that, the draft became like super powered. Like so, as soon as you got in the draft, like it was like slingshotting cars past. So I thought that was pretty interesting, and it seemed to help the Mazdas for a little bit, as well as the Acura, and then hurt the Cadillac because they just didn't really have the top end, and potentially they could have been maybe gear limited too, because usually the way the rear ends, the kind of the transmissions work, is they have what they call quick change gears in the transmission, which are like two spur gears that have different ratios, so they can quickly change kind of their final drive on the fly, and based on that, that's where they set their top gear in order to have good kind of straight line speed. So if they go too long on the ratio, basically, then they lose some of that acceleration, as well as so maybe they can't even get to their top speed. And then of course if they're too short on it, then it's just bagging off the rev limiter. So
right.
Which actually one thing I thought was interesting one year was, I believe it was Chip Ganassi.
Yep.
A few years back, they got the ratio wrong during the race. So like the first pit stop, they came in and they changed their final drive ratio during the race. I went like 3 laps down, but because it's 24, and especially with the way IMSA does wave buys on cautions and everything, they were back up there like 6 hours in or so, back on the lead lap. So they just decided to cut their losses early, and
right. But if memory serves, that was a really big miss. Like it's not like they were a little bit off. It was really limiting the car.
It was like, it wasn't even like in the draft they were hitting the rev limiter. It was like just normally. So it must have been weather changed, or maybe if just someone just put the wrong ratio or something. But
right.
But yeah, so that I always thought that was interesting. But yeah, so Wayne Taylor Racing and the Konica Minolta Acura taking the win again. I guess, but new to the Acura. Normally in a Cadillac. So yeah, it was a good one though. It was a good way to start off the racing season, I think. And yeah, I guess we also took a look at the Michelin Pilot Challenge race, which was the day before. So normally, in the past, you would have supported the Volt Racing team, but this year sounds like just taking a bit of a break, at least.
Yeah, I guess I was hit with the realization that allocating all of my time, and I do mean all of my time, at the beginning of the year wasn't beneficial. Like if I'm using all my available time from my normal job to go help the race team, it leaves me zero opportunity to help anyone should the need arise. And so yeah, I guess I told them this year that I just can't do it because, I guess life. So
yeah.
But yeah, previously and last year I did help them.
And so, you were telling me that you're looking also to try to do some racing yourself. I think we talked about it a little bit.
Yeah,
in the very first episode, but yeah.
By some sort of tragic coincidence, seems like every track event, like whether it's an amateur race or a track day, which obviously is at a much lower level based on our tier, is the same weekend as a real race. So yeah, it was just a hindrance to also what I want to do, because I want to race. I like racing. I want to do more racing, so I just need that availability.
Yeah, so but yeah, so it's the Pilot Challenge race is I believe the longest race of the year, 4 hours for them. And yeah, it was pretty good for both GS and TCR. There was some good scraps at the very end. There was kind of everyone got bunched up for a caution with. I think it went green again with like 4 minutes to go, so it was a big sprint to the finish, and the McLaren kind of got around everyone at the very end there and took the win. They've always been strong at Daytona. They just seem to have very good straight line speed.
They really do. If they manage to not blow up, they're pretty dangerous.
Yeah, and then behind them was a swarm of BMWs, 4 BMW M4s, so 2 Turner Motorsports, Bimmer World, and Stephen Cameron Racing BMW. So, and then next was a Camaro, and then kind of one of the cars we were looking at, the Riley Motorsports Supra, the first time for the Supra to be racing.
Mm-hmm.
They ended up 7th. So yeah, they kind of keeping an eye out on them. I was watching them towards the end because they were up as high as 3rd at one point. They seem to have very good pace in the infield, but just did not have the top end to really compete for the win. So,
which is honestly like a little surprising to me because it's a turbo car. So like one of the methods of BOP that IMSA has is, well, they call it a power stick, but it's effectively just a different tune.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not even like an in-depth tune. I mean, it's a complete tune, but effectively you're just holding more boost, right? So you have more power. It's a stick and it gives you more power. So it is interesting when you see someone with a turbo car that far behind. It's just seems like a missing BOP, you know.
Yeah.
But,
so I guess pending any BOP changes, either maybe we see them get a little more top end, or maybe the car's just like a short track special where like I think Mid Ohio's next.
After Sebring.
After Sebring. Which Sebring, we talked a little bit about McPherson, and over the bumps it might be a little tricky.
Mm-hmm.
But pending any kind of inherent suspension issues just from the design, they could be pretty good there. And then I think very fast at the next event at Mid Ohio. I think that they'd definitely be the ones to look out for there. But yeah, still a good result for them. I think they started pretty far back, so it's a good performance by the new car in the series. So we'll see if anyone else kind of picks those up. I guess kind of surprising to not see towards the front were the Audis. They're usually, I believe they won the championship last year. No, it was the Aston that won the championship last year, right? The core, not the core, Automatic Racing, I think. Automatic Racing, Aston Martin. But the Audi was up there the whole season. But yeah, they
were
had good
second,
pace,
I believe.
Yeah, they had good pace. Seemed like early race, but then kind of fell back a little bit. So,
mm-hmm.
And then the Porsches, I think both of them actually are. The BGB Motorsports Porsche didn't finish, and then the Wright Motorsports one didn't even start. So, which I think was related to the Hardwick incident. So since they didn't start, I'm guessing it happened sometime in practice or qualifying for one of either the Daytona 24 or the Pilot Challenge. So
right.
And then the Fords, the best placing Ford was 10th. And the best placing Mercedes was 8th with Windward Racing, who ended up winning the big one, the big 24. So I guess it just goes to show the level of competition here too. I mean, it's the team that did really well at the 24 also wasn't able to get top 5 at Pilot Challenge. So
yeah, well, an interesting note, at least I think, is if you look at GT3 cars, I think WEC is probably the gold standard for racing, at least around the world. But I was talking to one of the engineers that Wright partnered with, or not Wright, sorry, Windward. one of the Mercedes engineers that they partnered with, and he was telling me he thought that for GT4 competition, this was the closest you can get anywhere, right? So while WEC might be the standard for the higher levels elsewhere, it seems to be a very tight field. So
yeah, it's also a pretty big field. Like I've watched a little bit of the European, they support some of the WEC races and everything, the European GT4 Championship, and it's usually fewer cars, and it seems like a little less competition. So it's good to see. I mean, seems like a sweet spot because the cars seem to be pretty fast. They're fast enough to be interesting to drive for these amateur and team owners and everything that come in, and then with it being silver and bronze drivers only, it allows for more newer or people with financial backing to just jump in there and get some good racing in. So
yeah,
it shows in 24 entries, which is pretty good for a single class. So I guess 25 entries if you include the right car. But yeah, so it was a pretty good race. It went right down to the end. So we'll be looking out for those races in the future. I imagine maybe not as many teams will do the next event, but I guess we'll see. We'll keep an eye out on it. Usually Daytona's kind of
Daytona's pretty big. Lots of people show up just because they want to do it, and it kind of shrinks from there. But still, generally the GT4 field is pretty big. So
yeah,
we'll see.
And then I believe your boys, the Volt Racing team with Archangel, they had some issues. It looked like Brynjolfsson might have had a slight tap with the wall. I'm guessing coming onto the tri-oval, and I believe they changed a tire, but then came right back in for a tie rod change. So,
yep, that's about it. Hard weekend for them. A lot of work, a lot of good effort from the team, but they had an engine problem initially, so then they got a vehicle from another team to race, and then after that touch, they pit, and then they realized they had a bent tie rod, and so they had to pull it in the garage to change it, and that puts you pretty far down. So
yeah, and between that and getting taken out under yellow in the prototype challenge race, just not the best weekend.
Yeah, that too. I mean, that's also frustrating. Is a lot of things that were beyond their control, and good work and good effort by the team. But, sort of as you said before, that's racing. It happens, but it makes for a rough 2 weeks,
Yeah, for sure. So, but yeah, so that was unfortunate to see. But I imagine they'll rebound. They had a pretty strong. You guys had a strong performance last year at Sebring, which ended up being the last race of the season, where it's the second one this season.
Well, we went to Sebring twice.
Oh, that's
right. It was the last race of the season, but it was also the second. Well, kind of the second. It was the second for us. WeatherTech had a round 2 at Daytona.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
But yeah, so we were at Sebring a couple times, and I mean, it's honestly, although I am a fantastic individual to have on your race team, anybody listening, I will come help your crap can, amateur race team. Even with me not being there, I have faith in them. They're a good team, and when there weren't incidents, they finished well. Sometimes there was some heartbreak. Like Mid Ohio last year, it was a doubleheader. Both races there was incidents, right?
Yeah.
And it's like we had a good car for it, a good setup. We were ready to go. But when things didn't happen, they did well. And I look forward to seeing what they can do this year.
Yeah. So But yeah, I guess that brings us to the TCR cars. That one was there was some very good racing going on until, I mean, the whole race for sure, but there was a kind of a triple incident where three cars got taken out. I believe it was one of the Atlanta Speedworks Hondas, as well as the Alfa Romeo, the Soul Alfa Romeo, and then one of the Audis, I believe. All were very quick up at the front, and it was second, third, and fourth. But there was an incident in the bus stop, and they basically all took each other out. So that kind of paved the way for what it looked like to be Atlanta Speedworks and the other Honda Civic to just run away with it. But a late caution allowed the Unitronic JDC Miller Audi RS3 to rocket past them on the restart, and he ended up taking the win. It was a pretty good race there. And then a pack of Hyundais behind the two.
Yeah.
They didn't seem to have the pace of the Audis and the Honda and the Alfa Romeo until that met its demise, unfortunately. But they were all just kind of picking up the scraps, basically. So the Michael Johnson Racing Hyundai ended up third. So, and then there was one car we were kind of paying attention to, the Rockwell Autosport Development Audi. I know one of the guys that's crewing for them right now. As well as I've raced with Alex Rockwell's son, Eric, in a Champ Car race before. So, it's seen they made their IMSA, pro racing debut, running in the TCR class, and they started out in, I think it was ninth, and kind of worked their way up through kind of pit strategy, as well as staying out of trouble and everything. They worked their way up to third, I think, highest, but I think they kind of fell off mid-race, and then unfortunately had a big incident going into turn 3. It looked like a brake failure. Nothing was kind of confirmed there, but it didn't look normal. It didn't look like just kind of outbraking yourself and getting a little wrong. It seemed like the car just didn't even start to slow down. So
yeah, I didn't see it as it happened, but I saw the end, and it did look like a big incident.
Yeah, so that was unfortunate to see. I believe Nelson Canache, he ended up with a wrist fracture, so that no one wants to see that. But he did at least walk. He walked away from it, just not unscathed. But still, it was a very big hit. So that was a little scary to see. But hopefully they'll rebound and get back in there and go for some good results.
Yeah, I'm sure he will. It's good and bad thing about racing is it's pretty addicting. So it's pretty easy to want to get back in the game.
Yeah. So
I think after just a quick anecdote. I think after I had my biggest whoops on two wheels, and to be fair, I'm an idiot, and I didn't realize this until the end of the day, that I should have just packed up. But fixed the bike, went back out. It's just the standard thing, right? You want to be on track, and if you can keep moving, you'll do it. So I have faith in them.
Yeah. So, yeah, part of me is always, when I look at teams like that, teams that I might have either raced with or against, and they make that move up to the big leagues. It always makes me pay attention, because I would hope, my dream, of course, we all dream to one day try to do the same. So if someone else can do it, maybe we can too. But but it also reminds you, with the incident they have, that if you do want to compete on that level, you really got to be ready to just write off a whole car. And if you really want to run a full season. So
yeah, I mean, it's I think the base rule is never take anything to the track that you're not willing to lose entirely.
Yeah.
And that holds true no matter how expensive your car gets, you know?
Yes.
So, I mean, it'd be awesome to be up there, but yeah, you know, it's not just being able to buy a real race car. It's, you know, affording that racing is a different level entirely.
It's a whole different level.
Right.
But yeah, I guess speaking of, I guess, good advice, kind of as we were talking about earlier, we were talking about the results of this race and everything. We were just kind of talking about what different strategies the teams used to kind of finish where they did, and as well as maybe strategies that either can be also used in kind of amateur level, like Champ Car, AR, WRL, Lemons, even we're kind of talking about like different strategies and maybe kind of tech tips you could try to use to improve your finishes, but yeah, I mean,
so first of all, have a lot of money, go buy some air guns, air jacks. I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
But not really. That's not,
full crew.
That's not objective.
But yeah, I mean, of course, there's, as far as like race strategy, a lot of it is going to depend on your series rules. So I mean, I
think it'll entirely depend on that. You know,
yes.
Really is, you see these huge swings, and lots of series are kind of similar. But you know, if you there's a series called the 24-hour series.
Yep.
And part of their shtick, I guess, is that there's no fueling on pit lane. There's no your car drives out of pit at a very low speed. So low that our GT3 car, when I was there, couldn't do that with the pit limiter, right? I think it was like 25 kph.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So the drivers are like, the last gen GT3 car had a clutch pedal. So they're playing with that, just trying to keep the car moving slow enough. But, you know, if you have to drive really far and then you have to go to it's kind of cool how it was set up, but you go to a gas pump, literally, it was a gas pump. And then, you know, you drive back, when your fuel stop adds, 3 minutes just getting to and from the pumps. It's way different than what you can get away with in IMSA, which is different than WEC, and right.
It's interesting because that's very reminiscent of the 24 Hours of Lemons setup, where at most tracks you refuel in the pit lane, but you do your own refueling. But in this case, it was just like you drive off and let's go to the gas station, basically.
Yeah.
But yeah, it allows for the teams to not spend on fuel rigs and everything.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that specifically I thought was really cool that they sold it as a safety thing. I thought it was just a cool change in strategy. And then there was lots of teams using handheld, just generic, well, not really generic, but Milwaukee or Makita impact guns. Because you can't do that in any series. I'm not aware of any series that'll let you do that has fueling on pit road, because they're worried about electricity and gas.
Yeah.
But if there's no fuel there, just go for it. So it was kind of the Wild West when you weren't getting fuel, which is kind of funny.
Yeah, that's interesting. I never thought about that, having the electric power tools combined with fuel vapors. That could definitely not be good. And I guess that helps explain, like say with Champ Car, you can't do refueling and work on the car at the same time. So that's how that series avoids those kind of incidents. But in this case, you had the fueling and the tire changes in completely separate areas. So So that's interesting. I never thought of that. I did actually always wonder why the pros. I mean, I just assumed the pros didn't use electric impacts because they can have, you know, baller, super high speed,
some paoli guns,
air guns.
Yeah.
But I was just curious, like,
yeah, I think,
but yeah, that explains it.
You might be able to make an argument, like, so obviously, try not to get too into the weeds here, but the air guns are gonna move faster, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're gonna have more impacts per minute, but right, that adds a lot of headache. So you could probably make an argument that an electric gun would be better, even if it, will take the nuts off. Probably, honestly, not even a tenth of a second slower, but still slower.
Mm-hmm.
I think that trade-off's probably a whole argument on its own, but you can't even have that argument for most series.
Yeah. 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 So, but yeah, that's interesting. But yeah, so that, I mean, I guess that kind of, all of that leads us to, like, I guess our first tip, and that's
Memorize
your
them.
rules, memorize them, have them on hand, be ready to read them, and the more you're familiarize with yourself with them, then the more you can look for kind of loopholes or areas to not really exploit, but use the rules to their full potential.
Honestly, that's the story of motorsports, is finding loopholes and, quite frankly, exploiting them. Right? That's how you do it. And I personally feel that you should understand the rules going into a race. You should understand them well enough, like you're preparing to go argue with an official. Right? You should know them in and out.
Yes.
So then if some volunteer dude on pit says something to you, you're ready to go.
Yeah, which that can sometimes not work out, and sometimes it does. But yeah, be ready to defend that position if you're just coming from, like, well, but
know
but
what
this
you're
and
doing.
that, and that
and then,
is all written in the rules.
Then have them point to the rule book. So
yeah, it's exactly, and and just the different rule sets are really going to dictate kind of how your pit strategy is gonna play out. Like, I guess one example is racing in 24 Hours of Lemons versus Champ Car has very different kind of strategy. In Lemons, there's no minimum fuel time or minimum pit stop time when refueling. So, and there's also no limit really on fuel systems. There's just a capacity limit, but you can go all out on giant, not really fuel rigs, but fuel cells with really large inlet hoses and everything, and nice Hunsaker jugs. And those guys can fuel their cars super fast, and that's a big advantage because really in any motorsport, any racing, if you can gain seconds or even in this case potentially minutes in the pit lane, it's a lot easier than gaining a second on the track.
It's not quite the same in amateur racing, but the easy way to think about it is in a class like GT4 or whatever, where all the cars are supposed to be similar, you're fighting for tenths of a second, right? Fighting for them.
Yeah.
So if you can get a couple seconds in pit, that's huge. It's phenomenal, And then, that may not apply to the whole Chump Car paddock, but all the guys near the pointy end are running similar lap times, right? So same idea. Everything you can get in pit, you take.
Yeah, definitely. And then the strategy changes though for Champ Car because they have a 5-minute minimum pit stop when you're refueling, and so most teams can do that fueling in well under that 5 minutes. But that's also kind of part of the strategy. One, you have to make sure you can do that because you're just leaving time on the table if you're not. And then on top of that, the faster you can do that fueling, the more time it leaves for maybe tire changes or checking the oil, that kind of stuff, checking lug torques, checking tire pressures.
I think in that series, you should still be trying to get that done as fast as you can for exactly the reason you mentioned. There's a lot to check on the car, and you don't see pro teams do it because sometimes they are and you just don't notice. Like lots of GT3 cars have a tiny little readout for oil level, and they have those pressurized canisters and all that cool stuff.
Yep.
But, they don't spend extra time in the pits because they don't have a limit. But if you do, there's really no excuse then for stupid mistakes. If you have the time to check over it, do it. And you want to give yourself that time, right? Because if you use the full 5 minutes fueling the car and you didn't realize that you were down to 3 quarts or 2 quarts of oil, you could have if you were faster with fuel,
Yeah. Yeah. So, not only can it give you that advantage, it can prevent failures and then also be a little safer, which is why they have those limits, safety and I guess a little bit of cost, prevent teams with full pit crews and everything coming in and getting big advantages. So it's twofold there. And then I believe WRL and AR are both 3-minute minimums, I think. WRL might have no minimum. I'm not sure. But I know AR has, at least last time I checked, was 3 minutes. So a bit faster. So you have to get your fueling done a little bit quicker if you want to do anything else. But yeah, little, but still kind of the same idea.
Yeah, well, and those minimum fuel times too, just point out a difference in strategy, like we're talking about, right? If you're an IMSA and you're coming in for tires, whatever reason it is, right? You got a puncture, you got, it's just the end of the tires, they're falling off too much, whatever. Fill the car. Right? You're there. Even if it's only a splash, right? Like, even if it's not part of your planned fuel stop, you can fill.
Yeah.
The car's there. Let's stop getting tires changed. Fill it. Whereas in this 24-hour series or Trump car, that mandatory added minimum time, whether it's because you have to drive to some fuel tanks at 25 kph, or they just give you a kitchen timer with 5 minutes on it, fueling can be a detriment. So, I guess that's just an example of what we're talking about with different strategy and understanding it, is one layout.
Yeah.
Always fill the car. And the other one, maybe not.
Yeah, and I guess speaking of the pros, one strategy they employed at Daytona at the end there, when there's a pretty tight race between the Mazda, the Cadillac, and the Acura, was at least two of the Cadillacs, the Ally Cadillac and the Chip Ganassi Cadillac, they both came in kind of early to make the kind of, all of them had 2 more stops to go. The Cadillacs decided to kind of split it up into even chunks. They weren't going to be able to stretch it to do it on just one more. So instead they kind of short filled it, kind of did a quick stop early, and that jumped them ahead, kind of leapfrogged them ahead of the Acura. But then on the other end, the Acura had a short fill for the last one, so they were able to kind of leapfrog them back. So, but then at the same time, it allowed them to do on that, when the Cadillac short filled, allowed them to get out there on fresh tires and kind of undercut the Cadillac to try to also get more pace just from the car itself. So in pro racing, there's the strategy definitely needs to be very kind of tight. It needs to be very planned out. And in IMSA specifically, it can be very tricky because you actually don't want to wait for a yellow, because there's a full wave by procedure, and basically they won't start the pit stops until everyone's kind of stacked up. Like the pits close immediately as soon as the yellow flag flies. So because of that, you want to be the kind of the first one to do your last pit stop, because that way, if a caution comes out, basically what will happen is if the other team did the pit stop first, they'll be behind you, but it'll stack everyone up. Then you do your pit stop, and then you end up behind them basically for that kind of last sprint to the finish. So it can be very different there. Whereas with most of the amateur endurance racing I've done, you want to do everything you can to catch those cautions, because when you have those minimum pit stop times, 5 minutes while everyone's doing 30 miles an hour is a lot different than 5 minutes while everyone's doing 100 miles an hour. So yeah, but that all just kind of goes back to making sure you really keep an eye out on those rules and figuring out kind of what the best strategy should be for you. Kind of another strategy I've noticed for other race series as well as IMSA some of the time. It depends, but really I just see some teams, at least earlier in long endurance races, just taking basically every caution possible because there's just so little penalty, and it kind of moves that last stop maybe a little closer to maybe if there's no cautions towards the end of the race, it maybe affords you to skip that like one extra pit stop at the end.
Yeah, pretty much the general hand wave, right? So this is not always true, it's situation specific, but is taking care of everything now so you can have as short a stop as possible at the end, right?
Yes.
And then if you can take advantage of yellows, you do it, but since you can't really predict the future, you just push everything off as late as possible. If you get the yellow, that's great. And you just hedge your bets on trying to get that short stop at the end.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. So that's definitely a good strategy to try to use. I guess another kind of talking pros, and maybe also applicable to kind of amateur level, but especially in the pro-am classes, one thing that's pretty common to see is teams will qualify and start with their kind of amateur or paying or kind of gentleman driver in order to, assuming there will be a caution at some point where they can swap them out and it kind of stacks everyone back up and they can put their top driver in at the end, and then it's it gives them the best chance to kind of fight, especially if everyone else is their top drivers. So
right,
that's a pretty common strategy.
It is. It's worth noting though that for some series like Pilot Challenge this year, you couldn't. There was a maximum drive time. There used to just be a minimum drive time, so your amateur had to drive for at least 40 minutes. And then people would do that, and then their pro or their paid driver would be in for 3 hours and 20. But this year they've added a maximum drive time just specifically to avoid that.
Okay. Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and that's
interesting twist, I guess. Right? Yeah. Well, and if it's part of the rules, everybody has to do it. Right? If you're competitive,
yes,
generally you'd be like, I want to win, or I want to drive, but I want to win more. Just put my pro in. But now when everybody has to do it, it's like, oh, okay, cool. I get more drive time, and it's not, hitting my team. So I think that's kind of cool.
Yeah, and I think that kind of the way I kind of apply that to kind of amateur level, specifically like Champ Car that I've done, is I feel like it helps. It's a little different. It helps, I think, to have not necessarily your fastest guy in first, but at least your kind of most comfortable guy, the guy that's not learning the track or the car if he hasn't driven it yet. Get the kind of comfortable guy in, because that's when everyone's really stacked up, and it's going to help to have them in there, I guess. But sometimes it could depend, because if my experience in like doing the Watkins Glen race with Champ Car is it's a pretty big field, usually like 110 cars or so, and there's a lot of cautions at the beginning. So it might be, if you have a slower guy, it might be a good opportunity to get him in there and just drive around under caution a lot. So so that's going to kind of come with experience, how often you do different events and learn kind of because that's another thing. There's, at least in Champ Car, and even Lemons and that I've seen, where the tracks will have specific rules. like in Champ Car in the 24-hour VIR race. VIR will do these kind of code 35s, yep. So it'll be a purple flag, and basically everyone's just supposed to go 35, although usually what ends up happening is everyone just kind of sneaks up on the next person behind them, whatever speed they really need to go, and then ends up just being just kind of some guy doing 25 that's holding, a big stack of people up, becoming a pace car. But the intention is everyone's supposed to go 35, and they watch if there's a minimum, or I guess a minimum lap time that you should be doing that, that would equate to 35 miles an hour. So, but because most people pit during these times, it's hard to kind of enforce it, because you won't get a full lap through. Potentially sometimes won't get any full laps. It'll go back to green before you can do a full lap. So it's good to just keep an eye out on your kind of your pace, and then maybe slow down towards the end. But anyway, that's just, that track is different because they'll do hot pulls basically, although they're not really hot because you're under the code 35, but it's not a pace car situation. Whereas some tracks will do hot pulls, other tracks won't do hot pulls at all, and it's always, anytime there's an incident, like at Watkins Glen, there'll be a full course caution. So, and the pace car will come out. So that's again, that's not necessarily in the rules. Maybe it'll be in the supplemental rules for the tracks, but it's something that maybe you need to really just go out there to learn. Which, of course, experience is always gonna is a pro tip. Have a lot of experience. But it just goes with get out there and race. If you really want to do it, go out there and race, and the more you do it, the better you get. We talk about driver mod, like that's the other part of this too. Like, just make it, if you don't even have to worry about putting your slow guy in if all of you are fast guys. So, but yeah, so knowing the rules of the track, even the series, that's why I find a good advice I try to give, at least to kind of champ car teams that are looking to get into it, is if you don't want to just jump into racing, at least go and volunteer for the events. You get credits towards your entry fees, and then you kind of get to see what the different tracks are like, what the different rules and kind of procedures are. So, and you get to watch kind of the top teams and see how they do their pit stops, and try to get some free advice basically. So that's definitely a good way to go. But yeah, but as far as drivers and which one to put in when, a lot of times people will save, definitely in the pros, they always put their kind of best guy, their ringer in. So if there's a big battle to be had at the end, that obviously they're caution. If a caution stacks everyone up, they want their fastest guy in there. So, that's very common strategy on kind of all levels of motorsport. So nothing revolutionary there, but just know that if you are at the end of a race, even if it's in Champ Car, maybe you're going to be racing against some of the team's top guys too. Right. So that's like one thing to look out for. But yeah, as far as kind of more, I guess another thing to kind of look out for and is minimizing penalties. It's kind of another related to the rules as well as experience and everything. But penalties are usually, if penalties and crashes are really what end, or at least hinder most good runs at a race, and keeping it clean, which hopefully also keeps you out of the penalty box as well as avoiding those pass under yellows. That can be a big one too. That's going to be a huge advantage there.
Right.
So it's definitely something to look out for. Be very, if you've never been to a track, kind of the first time out there, try to pay really close attention to where all the flag stations are, and just kind of have a mental note of them, and just try to check them every time you go by, and that can easily help you a lot there. And then another one that I feel like a lot of amateur teams don't take advantage of is radios. I don't see really every team with a radio, which I feel like is kind of mandatory. If you want to make really any strategy calls in order to bring your driver in, that's not, because if you don't have a radio, you really just have to either you need a pit board or you just need to tell them like, hey, come in at this time and have a clock in the car
honestly,
or something. So
I think radios are huge. And this is outside of the pro world, right? Because every pro team has one. It's not even a question.
yeah.
I guess just moving past things that you might hear in a driver meeting. This is it's huge. You want a two-way, right? Like it's nice to be able to tell your driver what to do. Sometimes they'll either zone out or be too red misty to look at a pit board or a clock. But communication goes both ways, right? If they're feeling something weird and they're going to pit, they want to be able to tell you, and you want to be able to hear it, right? And that's how you're ready.
Yeah.
It takes a lot more stress to legitimately be ready to go at any second for 8 hours, right? Because then you're at pit, ready, and it sucks.
In your hot,
it
in your hot suit.
Sucks. So, this will make your life easier, but it could potentially help you avoid any pit stops you didn't need, right? If the driver's feeling something and it's just a weird thing that's maybe about your car that they don't, or it's something that can wait, so you're going to tell them to drive through it. Whatever it is, it might be able to help you avoid an extra pit stop. Just communication is key, and I hate sounding like what you probably hear your normal fucking 9-to-5 job, but really it's huge. So I totally agree. Radios are very important. I remember when we were racing a long time ago. I think it was our first race together in Lemons. People were ready like 95% of the time. When I was driving the car through a belt in that 5%, right? Pulled up to our pit. Someone was in the bathroom. Two other people were getting food. And the fourth person was trying to watch me in the stands. I guess he didn't see me come in. Or he did, and he started like hauling ass down. So when I don't see anybody and I get out of the car and start changing the belt, right? It very easily could have been avoided with radios. So
yeah, and that's also where it could be an advantage to have radio for every crew, every person on the team, so they can go to the bathroom and still hear anything. And they're still in the bathroom, so they have to run back, but they know to run back. And I think as a driver, it helps to communicate more. I know I forget sometimes, like I have an issue and I'll just go right into the pits without really talking to anyone. Like just as soon as something happening, maybe start talking through it. Sometimes being on the pit wall a lot, it'll really stress me out when people start, there's a vibration. Like maybe it's really not that bad. Like some people are more sensitive than others, or maybe it's been going on the whole race and just it's not a new vibration, but it can start to really stress you out. You worry about kind of bringing them in, but still having that communication's good. Letting them know that, okay, guys, I think I just have to bring it in so that they're ready.
Just specifically on the vibration thing, that's in amateur racing. That's something I've seen a lot, right? These cars are not really meant for what they're doing, and the car's starting to degrade, and it's fine, but everybody's in a rush in the pits when they do the driver change, and then your driver goes out and they're so pumped, whether it's adrenaline or just whatever, they're going and they don't notice anything because they're just, it's a lot to go from 0 to driver change wheel to wheel racing now, you know. And then all of a sudden they notice the vibration 25 minutes in. They think it's new. And then here you could have the other driver just saying, nah, dog, it's been happening, you know, don't worry about it.
Yeah, but it sometimes there is a new vibration and the driver's like, oh yeah, the car always shakes. But so it's, but just having that conversation though allows you to try to troubleshoot that before just coming in and wasting a pit stop. And I guess another thing I started doing a while back that I found that I hope was helpful to my team is whenever there is an incident, depending on the track, like I said, it can be hot pulls or a full course caution every time. Basically, whenever I saw a car off or an incident as I'm driving by, I let them know when I'm going by it, where it is, as well as kind of how severe it looks like, because that can really help you. Say like at Watkins Glen, for example, which they always do full course cautions whenever they need to pick up a car. But if the car is not crashed and it's just kind of sitting on the straight, maybe they wait a little bit. Maybe they wait for another car to break down, or just to get everyone kind of in position. But like with an incident like that where the car it looks fine, but it's just not running, that can probably be a quick pull. Whereas if you see parts everywhere at the end of in the bus stop or something, like maybe that that one's going to be probably a long caution, so maybe that's when you want to come in and do your pit stop.
Then you can tell your guys to get ready.
Yeah, and help them make that decision to if they want to take that pit stop now, because if you can hold off that first pit stop, at least in Champ Car where you have a 2-hour maximum drive time for drivers, it can it can change your strategy up where it can. Maybe if you take that first stop too early, you lose the opportunity to take a caution towards the end instead. So if they know that it's going to be a long one, or at least kind of clues towards it, it can really help them make that decision, or help you just make the decision for them.
Yeah, and I mean that general approach to the strategy is kind of similar to what I said about IMSA, right? You hedge your bets on that last one being as short as possible, so you're delaying your pit stop for as long as possible. But
to open up as many avenues in the strategy as possible. So because like maybe the team you're fighting against doesn't take that first caution, and instead they take that last one, and it turns out that was the right move. That can cost you a win potentially. So just having that conversation, I mean, I think it's important for that driver to have the conversation with the pit. So it is sometimes there can be too much information the pit is giving to the driver, and then I mean they should be able to focus with someone talking, but sometimes drivers can be a little picky with that, I guess. But
right, I mean generally if it's not important, I don't want anybody talking to me. Not like I can't focus, but like, bro, I don't care. Like if it's not important, don't. As Kimi Räikkönen said, leave me alone. I know what I'm doing.
Yeah, because like some drivers, they like to hear the gap to the car behind them or in front of them. Especially if you're racing for a overall podium position or something. But then other drivers don't want to hear it because it kind of stresses them out, makes them drive differently than they would have. Maybe you just, they'd rather just kind of focus on what they're doing and not what the person behind them is doing.
Well, and I think there's some subconscious things there too, because I've met drivers who like it. I've met drivers who don't, or at least they say they like it and they say they don't. But I have yet to see anyone whose lap times improved by that. Every time I see someone talking to the driver, even if it's a really good driver, it only hinders them,
Yeah, there was only one time I can remember where I'm talking to a driver and telling them like, hey, the person's kind of cashing you like 3 seconds a lap. They sped up because they just, I guess, thought that they were the last driver of the race, so they were just trying to bring the car home, and it didn't seem like there wasn't much of a chance to catch the person ahead, and the person behind was pretty far behind, but then the gap started coming down a lot, so kind of giving them that information helped, and they started speeding up, and then it made that gap kind of stabilize. So, but yeah, for the most part, racing is a big mental game for at least on the driving side. And I mean, if anything that lowers the driver's confidence is usually going to make them slower. So it's definitely something to look out for. But yeah, I mean, I guess still talking kind of pit stops and everything. Really, like practicing different things in a pit stop is also super important. I mean, you can see the pros, between practice sessions or like the night before the race, they'll be out there practicing pit stops and everything. And for them, it's, I mean, there's no minimum times or anything here. So, every second they can save is something they can save over the other guys. So,
right. But I mean, if you don't take fuel, let's say in Champ Car, same thing, right? So as fast as you can get those tires on, as fast as you can get out of the pits. So,
exactly. And then, yeah, as we said, if you can, and in Champ Car specifically, the faster you fuel, the more other things you can do. So if you do have those 5-minute stops, so it's definitely something. It can be hard for some teams that maybe have a lot of rental guys that come in, kind of arrive and drive. But if you can try to coordinate it, have them come a little earlier and go through everything, show them, all the tools and where everything is and that kind of stuff if they need to help out. And then also one thing I've had some teams not really do a good job with when I arrive and drive is kind of showing you how to operate all the different parts of the car, specifically like in the cockpit, like how do you turn it on? Because some teams have some interesting ways to start a car or different systems. One car that I drove they had a reserve battery, which was really cool, but because of that, it made you had to make sure you're on the right battery when you're starting, basically, or basically they had a switch that you could combine the two to have more kind of cranking amps, and then you'd switch to, I think, just one of the batteries while driving. So, a little trickier, and then knowing what all the buttons and switches do. Sometimes, I mean, I guess from the team side, it helped if you do a better job of labeling everything to make things clear. But then from the preparation side with your driver, just still, as long as you can show them how everything works, and that can be helpful too, of course.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it always boils down to just being as fast and working as efficient as you can. So some of this stuff might sound like, things for you might expect an elementary schooler to do. Like, it's so basic that you just don't think about doing it. You know what I mean? But, I see so many teams that have, they do color coding. If there's a quick adjustment on the car, they just have a giant neon circle around where they can stick that tool in. It's just all comes together. You know what I mean? So even this silly little stuff that you might think is stupid and not worth your time, anything to make it easier, because you're trying to save as much time as you can in the pits, which I guess might. Well, go ahead.
Yeah, just like when you're under stress, when you're under duress, and you're in this, someone comes in, you have to fix something real quick. Like, all these things can help kind of make it more clear to people. Because maybe you know how to do it when you're just in the shop working on the car and low stress, but as soon as everyone's running on adrenaline and everything's, something's happening that you're not ready, like just being prepared, can really help, help yourself perform under stress.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I guess that would sort of lead into like the next thing I would consider as a tip is having everything ready to go in the pit. And I mean, so far all these tips have been pit heavy, but again, that's because if you're racing with a close car, the pits is where your biggest gains will be. A second in the pit is you're probably, if you're in a close race with someone, not gaining 1/10 of a second every lap on them, which means, the time it takes you to sneeze in the pit is bigger than what your driver could get in 10 laps, which depending on the track is, 25 minutes of driving, right? But having everything ready to go. You know, if I don't know how much attention people would pay after a pit stop. Certainly the camera when you're watching a pro race doesn't really stay there, but it's a mad flurry just as much as it is during the pit stop, because as soon as that's done, you prep for the next one. Right? Because the driver can go out and something can happen. They can get a flat on their outlap and they need to come right back in. So, you know, you're running tires up to the pit wall.
Yep.
You know, you're resetting everything. You're making sure the guns are good to go. You know, for the pros, which you don't really have this in Champ Car, but, you know, you refill the fuel rig. So I guess just put an emphasis on making sure everything that you need is ready to go, right? So maybe you're in the bathroom and you have a radio because you listen to us and you took our advice and your driver's like, shit, I got to come in. So you run out, everything's there, you know? And, you know, I mean, sometimes the driver will come in and say there's a problem. And, you know, if they say it's a vibration, you don't really know what that is. You know, maybe you can narrow it down if they give you some more description, but, you know, there's everything you can use to go faster and figure it out sooner. Pays huge dividends at the end. So, you know, I think that's key. And, you know, so honestly, in a amateur racing series, I would have the tools that you need to work on the car. If you've modified the car, I mean, obviously you have to put a cage in it, but if you've added a lot of parts, I would do as much as I can to make them all similar bolt sizes. Yeah, I've seen a lot of teams just use what they have lying around, which is great. When you're building it, it's easy. You know, hey, that bolt's on the ground, use that. But if you can have 2 socket sizes, that'll help you when you're actually racing. So then you have those sockets, the impact, the box end wrenches, all ready to go. Only 2 sizes or 3, you know, whatever you ended up using, but as minimal as possible. You know, you can get black flagged for body work if it looks bad, like it's about to fall off. So maybe have some, I mean, if you want to ball out, have some bare bond or, you know, Chump Car equivalent, a bunch of duct tape stuff together, you know.
Gorilla tape.
Like, these are things you can prep for beforehand, right? So, you know, take a bunch of Gorilla tape, put on some wax paper, and then put the strips over each other so you have one giant panel of Gorilla tape, you know, and then, you know, it's on wax paper, so you're not going to lose the tackiness, and that's your poor man's bare bond, and it's ready to go. It's not something you want to be fiddling with in the pit, right? You don't want to be tearing off strips if you don't need to. It's just have everything you can possibly imagine prepared.
Yeah, and quickly going back to, you were talking about hardware. One thing I guess one little quick tip, if you run a Japanese car, they use JIS bolts, Japanese Industrial Standard. So one thing that's a little different about them is for certain thread sizes, they use smaller kind of socket heads on them. So, for example, between basically like ANSI, so like US spec metric, which kind of a weird way to say it, but like so ANSI as well as DIN spec, which is what you'll mostly find at like Home Depot when you look for metric stuff there. So for example, M6 will be a 10 millimeter socket for both of those, but when you find yourself with a M8 thread, it'll be a 13 mil socket for ANSI, and then a 12 mil socket for the Japanese, the JIS bolt. So if you have a Japanese car and you want to try to keep all your bolt size common, you can, specifically McMaster is where I find them the easiest to find, but ordering those bolts when you want to add stuff to your car so that you can keep that common socket size can definitely help limit the number of tools you need at the pits, and then also when you're working on it, just less hassle.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's a good point, is pay attention to the, you know, maybe you're ordering all M6s, but the saga head might change. So pay attention to what you're actually interfacing with. You know, it's a good point.
Yeah. So, but yeah, so, I mean, yeah, so a lot of this you can do kind of, before the race, before you even get to the race. Like a lot of these kind of tips are kind of all preparation based, so that when you get into that moment, when you get on the track, having fun, hopefully, then everything's kind of ready to go, and you can react quick um, and maximize your weekend, maximize your performance. Like maybe maybe your car doesn't have the pace that weekend, but if you can make up most of it with strategy, or maybe even get ahead because of strategy and good pit work and everything, that can be another way you can win. You don't even have to have the fastest car at that point. So, but yeah, there's just there's so many things you can do. There's another thing I just thought of. Kind of speaking of communication with pits, one thing, maybe a little more champ car specific, but like really, I guess any large field. At Lemons, it's a little different because they just do a random start usually. But one thing I like to do at the start of champ car races is I ask especially if I'm like really far in the pack, I'll ask the pit wall to tell me when the leader is kind of passing the start finish line on the first warm up lap. So it gives me an idea of where they're gonna kind of call the green, where over the radio, so I can kind of be ready. I found that was pretty helpful. I did that at Road America, so I was still coming out of Canada Corner basically, and was getting the call. Then I was able to jump like 6 cars or something before I even got to the start finish. So which is allowed in Champ Car, not in IMSA. So but yeah, so just good communication, good just good prep, and and over time you'll kind of learn more and more, and that's why you just got to get out there and race.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, I mean, it's the same reason why you see the kind of the same teams in the WeatherTech series winning these big races, like Wayne Taylor Racing. Like no matter which car they're bringing, they're still winning. So it just shows it's really a testament to the team and of course the drivers they bring. But at that level, it's almost really that team prep, the setup of the car that they're able to do, communication between the driver and the engineer to figure out how to find that setup, and yeah, it's I guess we could quickly kind of talk on the setup side. I think especially at amateur level, it's really important to have a setup that works for everyone, and that's easy to drive. I think having just the fastest lap really isn't gonna get you too far if the next lap after that is 2 seconds slower, just because you overheated the tires, or you pushed too hard and you kind of lost focus or something.
Yeah, or if you I don't know how many teams actually set up a car per track, in an amateur series, but if you do, and you set up for your hot shoe driver, and the car is twitchy and nervous, and your slower guy gets in, the tenths that your hot shoe guy will gain will be dwarfed by the seconds your slow guy will lose.
Yeah, just because he's not comfortable.
Yeah. So easy to drive, especially in amateurs, is the key.
Yeah, understeer at the limit makes it much easier. And yeah, having a car that's just kind of consistent, and I think from a driver perspective, also just not. It's I know I personally do it. I try to go out there and I want to set the fast lap for the team, or for that session or whatever, but it's a lot of times I've found that, especially with the kind of the tires you run, like a shout out to episode 1 of this season where we talked 200 tread wear tires, but a lot of times, and really any tire, if you push it too hard, it'll overheat and you can either permanently lose performance or at least for a short, kind of a few laps while it kind of recovers. And just because you did that one lap that was half a second faster, a few tenths faster, it might cause you to have a few, second slower laps in a row. So just having a good, consistent pace can really be more beneficial. I think, as a team owner, leader, or captain, it can be good to try to promote, maybe not trying to get that fast lap, but either maybe trying to specify a pace or at least just kind of give an idea of what you would like to see the pace be. Make sure you let them know if you need them to stay off the curbs, that that's been told beforehand, right. Stuff like that. So yeah, that can always be important too. But yeah, so there's so many different angles you can look at, so many different places you can find more time, speed, efficiency. It's just it either comes with experience or getting people around you that have experience. So or just listening to this podcast. That basically, I think.
Yeah, pretty much everybody listening, you're ready to go racing the pros. So congratulations.
Yeah. I think every episode you listen to is an automatic tenth a second, no matter every track. I think that's what I heard.
I believe it. That sounds right.
But yeah, that's why we're here. We're not, we haven't won the Rolex 24 or anything, but
not yet.
But we basically, breathe, eat, and sleep racing, and want to do it as much as possible, and have tried to do it as much as possible to this point. So anyone maybe starting out, we're gonna try to help you guys out, and then maybe for the guys who have been racing for a while, maybe give you just another perspective. Right. So that's what we're here for, and that's kind of what we want to do with this episode, combined with some good kind of racing result talk. So
yeah.
So I would expect we're hoping to do more. Yeah, we do a lot more tech focused episodes. Those seem to be the most popular. And sprinkle in some, professional racing results, some amateur racing results, and of course, as always, if you look at if you want to reach out to us, we have all our social medias, our Instagram, our Facebook, all at Motorsports Tech Talk.
Yep.
Let us know what you want to hear. If you have any questions, that kind of thing, let us know.
Yeah, get at me.
Yeah. So, so this episode should be going up Monday, the 1st of February. So basically, we're planning to try to kind of standardize our release schedule. We'd like to get at least one episode out a week on Monday. And then from there, we might do some bonus ones, kind of like we did last week with the Roar, as well as like kind of preview of the 24, since it was kind of topical, of course, being right before the race. So, but yes, that's our plan going forward. So look out for episodes on Mondays, and then maybe keep an eye out for bonus ones. But yeah, I think that's mostly gonna do it for this week's episode. Do you have anything else, Eric?
No, I don't think I have too much else. Drive fast, don't suck. That's about it.
Yeah. So, that's another long one. Also, you could let us know if you like the longer or shorter form stuff. We always really think more content is more better, but I don't know, maybe it's just a little too much rambling for you guys, or maybe you like the rambling. So, let us know what you think. But if you made it this far, we appreciate you, and we hope you stick around for the long haul. We'll keep putting these out. So thanks again for listening, and we'll talk to you guys again soon.
See ya.